You need God when you're navigating human complexities. The human economy is so layered and so divided, it is very difficult to comprehend, let alone even understand the math required to manage human relationships. It becomes so normalized and accepted that we miss the importance of objectively understanding and studying to make ourselves skillful when interacting with human beings. A house divided against itself cannot stand. The human house is divided in so many levels and layers. To string these multiple realities together, you need God, the creator of the human frame and biology. Some of the factors that contribute to the divide in the human economy: generational divides and evolving mentalities. You have so many different eras, so many different generations, and these groups are bonded together by shared values, shared experiences, ageism, and this bonding of these different human groups based on the eras they were born into can shield them or become a barrier for them connecting to other groups that may have different experiences. So, some examples: the silent generation and baby boomers. This is post World War II, mid 20th century era. Their mentality, they have more of a duty mindset, institutional loyalty, and collective sacrifice. They often view human relationships through the lens of rigid structures, hierarchy, and keeping up appearances. In a secular world, they find it difficult to understand why younger generations throw out traditional norms that they see as essential for social survival. And you can tell this mindset is very much still alive with the baby boomers and the silent generation, because majority of them hold a lot of political leadership positions, and they keep those positions forever. So you'll notice, like with the older generations of human beings, hey, what's up, Minecraft? They really have a rigid grip on tradition to the extent where they completely will diminish a lot of the younger generation's perspectives and just really lowering their opportunities for the younger generation to come in and fulfill some of these roles. It's almost like it becomes a tug of war between the baby boomers, the silent generation, and like your millennials, your Generation X's, and your Gen Z's. You'll notice that there's like this sort of like rigid warfare where a lot of the older generations refuse to give up some of these political seats or these sort of like ideologies to make room for like more newer ways of doing things. So you have Generation X, which is the late 20th century era. Here you have cynicism and independence. Their mindset is on self reliance, skepticism of institutions, and pragmatism. Growing up as the latchkey generation during times of rising divorce rates and political scandals, their secular coping mechanism is fierce individualism. They can be hard to deal with because they naturally default to distrusting collective goals. You have your millennials. This is on the turn on the millennial or millennium era. So they have idealism and burnout, purpose driven, experiential, and intensely collaborative. The complexity as the first generation to feel the weight of a rapidly secularizing West. They often replace traditional religion with secular faiths like political activism, career ambition, or wellness culture, leading to high rates of burnout and moral anxiety. Then you have Gen Z and Gen Alpha, 21st century digital era. Their mindset, hyper-connected, fluid, and deeply anxious. The complexity, raised entirely in the digital age without a shared religious anchor, reality itself feels highly subjective. They are navigating massive questions of their identity, mental health, and truth in echo chambers, making communication across generational lines feel like translating entirely different languages. So just look at the complexities of dealing with human beings just based off of the generational differences in the eras and how different the mindset is. So you see how challenging it can be just talking to people who represent different eras. And without a God to establish absolute rights and wrongs, human norms are built on shifting sand, constantly changing principles. Because most of the time, human beings develop their moral and ethic compass based off of the environment and the circumstances or conditions that they find themselves in. And conditions change. Whereas maybe you grew up in poverty, your beliefs around wealth may have been negative. Like people who have money, they're always, still in the show or making people who are poor look bad. I used to always get clowned when I was poor, but then as these people elevate up the ladder of wealth, then it's sort of like, well, actually, wealth is not so much of a bad thing, and you need wealth. You need to have some sort of security. So that in and of itself shows you how human beings alone without God, their belief systems, their attitudes, their sort of moral compass is so changeable based off of the circumstances. And that's where most humans who don't believe in God, that's where they resource sort of like their attitude of how to interact with the world is based off of their environment. And it's constantly shifting, it's constantly changing. So it says here, moral relativism, what is considered deeply virtuous in one culture or era. For example, one culture may have like fierce tribal loyalty, whereas another one might be seen as nepotism or xenophobia. It can be different, difficult to even identify which group or collective to connect with because of the values being so drastically different. So, trying to deal with people when good and bad are completely dependent on context means you are constantly aiming at a moving target. Then you factor in social contracts and sacred covenants. In a secular world, human relationships are governed by social contracts, agreements based on mutual benefit. If a contract no longer benefits someone, they have a rational incentive to break it. This is much harder to navigate than a sacred covenant, an unbreakable promise made by a higher power. So there's a lot of social contracts with human nature. Human beings have a very unique way of creating these sort of like unspoken rules. When you're dealing with human nature, there's a plethora of unspoken rules. There are certain understandings that maybe certain ethnic groups, certain classes of wealth, only within their group they understand. People on the outside looking in, you may see these people and think like, oh, they're just like me. They look like me. They're a human being. Not really. When you're dealing with humans, you got to remind yourself what you see is not always what you get because you don't know the sort of attitude or mentality that's driving that person. So you have to really spend time in prayer. Understanding God's word is more than just reading narratives and stories and fairy tales. This is giving you insight into human nature and the evolution of the human mentality, mindset, attitude, and also the many different factors that play into human life, whether it be spirits, demons, different entities, spiritually, conditions. There's so many factors that influence the human psychology. And humans, independent of the Most High, they are just enmeshed in social contracts. People have already determined who is going to fulfill what role in their lives. Who This is what the famous people look like. This is how the famous people act. This is what, deserves my attention, sort of like my investment. These groups are the groups that I feel like I can align with. We have a brain that is so engineered to draw conclusions so quickly that it starts a lot of times in high schools. And that's half the work in therapy for me, is teaching people how to really challenge some of these assumptions and conclusions that their brain draws about themselves and the world without giving themselves an opportunity to explore evidence against it. Because what a human will do is whatever they believe to be true or 100% factual, they'll function from that space. Even if there could be evidence against it, they'll diminish it. they'll diminish it, they'll count it out, they'll completely filter it out because that's how the brain works. It's constantly operating from a confirmation bias. So you have clashing belief systems and ideologies. When humans stop looking for meaning, they look around and they invent substitute belief systems to fill the void. So you have secular dogma, political ideologies, economic theories like hypercapitalism or Marxism, and social movements often take on the exact same favor, tribalism, and intolerance for dissent as historical religious inquisitions. They see the ego as the highest authority. Without a deity to humble the human ego, self actualization and personal happiness become the ultimate goals. Dealing with someone whose highest moral boundary is their own emotional comfort makes compromise incredibly difficult. Spiritual influences in a secular world, even without a traditional God, humans are inherently metaphysical creatures. We still experience spiritual drives, but they manifest in complex, fragmented ways. Humans have an innate desire for worship and transcendence. Without God, people often direct their spiritual energy towards celebrities, influencers, political leaders, or brands. This creates intense cults of personality that defy logic and reason. So, a lot of the worship of artists, entertainers, influences is just misplaced devotion that is really supposed to be held by worshiping the Most High, worshiping your Creator, and it gets displaced to it's like faith displaced into like human um, influencers. So you have this new age spirituality, manifestation, astrology, individualized mysticism, allow people to create a customized spiritual framework because this framework is entirely self-authored. Two people sitting in the same room might have completely incompatible views on fate, energy, and cosmic justice. Astrology is a really big divider in our community where you'll have some people in relationships. I'm not dating you because you're a Gemini or you're a Scorpio or you're a Cancer, and you see how complex the human mind is. They haven't, at hello, they're already drawing this conclusion of what type of person that you are based off of what they read in the astrology literature. So a lot of these different frameworks are just pieces of evidence that just confirms their biases because the brain is a threat detector. It's always looking for a way to survive, to protect itself, to defend against any particular threat. And what astrology is sort of like a, architected threat sort of like detector where it just sort of lets you know ahead of time which sign. And incompatibility is essentially just a threat, alarm system. Hey, this person is not compatible. This person may not be aligned with what you're aligned with. That's all it is. And that ruins the opportunity for people to come together who can complement each other, even though you may be different from each other. Then you have existential dread. Without the promise of an afterlife or a cosmic plan, humans carry a heavy undercurrent of existential anxiety. This fear of insignificance often drives people to be defensive, aggressive, or hyper controlling in their daily interactions. So you need God to navigate and to help you have a firm awareness and understanding of the complexities of human nature, essentially. Salute to the chat. Hope you guys are having a blessed day. No, this isn't pre-recorded. So I pray that God gives you guys the understanding and the patience to be able to draw closer to him and his word, that he may help protect you and shield you from any evil, negative energy, or misalignment with the purpose and grace and favor that he has for your life. God is a very big God, so there's enough room for all of us to win, and to be prosperous and to be fruitful and to be blessed. You don't have to squeeze your way in. There's enough space for all of you guys to be valued and to be just tremendously blessed. So I pray that on you. I wish that on you. Hope you have a